What do we really know about Leonardo da Vinci, a name that has become a symbol of the Renaissance? The image of a man who was able to combine painting and mathematics, anatomy and music, military engineering and philosophy. But what if behind all the familiar facts of his life there is another layer hidden, mysterious, hidden from the eyes of his contemporaries and from you and me? Leonardo left behind hundreds of sheets of drawings, pictures, sketches. Most of them have survived in fragments, as if someone had deliberately scattered the pieces of a mosaic, not allowing us to put together the complete picture. And it is in these fragments, in the omissions, in the blank spots, in the strange notes in mirror writing, that one of the most fascinating mysteries of history is born. Imagine that some of his ideas were never shown to the world. Imagine that he himself chose to hide them, and not just in a closed diary, but in secret rooms, windowless rooms, dungeons, and secret workshops, where neither customers nor even the closest students had access. Some chroniclers mention strange corridors in the palaces of his patrons, about rooms where the presence of strange devices was felt, but which no outsider saw. Did these rooms really exist? Or are they just romanticized legends? The answer is still unknown. But the fact that his inventive spirit could not be limited to a few albums of drawings, no historian doubts this. And so we find ourselves faced with an intriguing question. What exactly was he hiding? Among Leonardo's famous drawings, we see projects that were far ahead of their time. Flying machines that resemble modern gliders. A parachute, the design of which turned out to be functional when it was recreated in the 20th century. A propeller rising into the sky is a prototype of a helicopter. A mechanical knight who could move his arms and sit down. Underwater breathing apparatuses that, if built, would allow a person to stay underwater for tens of minutes. Now imagine that all these things were not just sketches, that at least some of them really existed in the form of models hidden in basements. That someone, perhaps Leonardo himself, tested them at night when darkness fell over Milan or Florence, and no one saw the strange experiments. Why didn't he show them? Why didn't he give them to rulers who could use them in war or construction? This is where the most interesting part begins. Leonardo lived at a time when every new idea could become a tool of political games. His talent was in demand but also dangerous. He was expected to provide drawings for fortresses, military vehicles, and engineering structures. And at the same time, he saw how every invention instantly turned into a means of destruction. In his notes, he left the words, "I do not reveal the methods of underwater breathing, because they can become a means of destroying ships." He realized that his discoveries could bring not only benefit, but also disaster. Therefore, it is likely that he deliberately hid the most dangerous. Now let's try to put ourselves in his place. 15th century. Italy is a mosaic of warring city-states. Milan is fighting Florence. Venice is opposing Genoa. Each ruler is eager to gain an advantage, and any new technology is a chance to win. At the same time, the Inquisition is closely watching everything that seems too strange or heretical. And in such an atmosphere, Leonardo creates things that even we today would call revolutionary. Isn't it logical that he decided to leave some of his works in the shadows? Some researchers believe that there are entire notebooks that we have not yet seen. Somewhere in private collections or in the Vatican vaults, there may be the very pages that would complete the drawings we know. There is evidence that after his death in 1519, his notes were divided and some were taken by the most influential families of Europe. Some say it was the Medici, others that it was the French royal court. But the fact remains, the surviving volumes are only a part of his legacy. So we can boldly ask, what have we lost? And have we really lost it forever? Imagine a dark basement in the heart of Florence. It smells of wax and dampness. On a wooden table are unfolded sheets. An oil lamp casts a golden light on the drawings. A human figure with metal joints that can move. A machine with a large wing designed to use the power of human muscles. A diving suit with tubes leading to the surface. These are not just fantasies. These are carefully thought out mechanisms. And they are waiting for their time. It seems incredible that one mind could give birth to so many ideas. But such was the nature of Leonardo. It was not enough for him to draw the beauty of the world. He wanted to understand how it works and reproduce these laws in machines. Today we look at his works as a symbol of dreaminess and genius. But back then, in the 15th century, it could have seemed like dangerous witchcraft. And perhaps that is why he hid some of his creations from the eyes of others. And here is the question that will haunt us on this journey. What if these inventions had been realized? Would humanity have risen to a new era much earlier? Or, on the contrary, would we have destroyed ourselves, not being ready for such technologies? This story is not only about the past. It is a story about Uber, that knowledge can be both a blessing and a curse. Leonardo seems to have understood this better than anyone. We stand before the veil of its secrets, and that veil is about to begin to lift. Imagine a city in Renaissance Italy, narrow streets stretching between high stone walls. From above you can hear the bells of the cathedrals, in the shops the bustle of merchants, and in the squares the arguments of philosophers and artisans. But behind all this bustle of life hides another world, a world of silence, shadows, and closed doors. It was here that Leonardo da Vinci set up his workshops, known only to a select few. There has long been talk about Leonardo's secret rooms, and although there is little direct evidence of their existence, the testimonies of contemporaries allow us to imagine what it might have looked like. In the palace of Lodovico Sforza in Milan, where Leonardo worked for years, there are mentions of narrow corridors and walled-up passages. One of the servants wrote in a letter that the artist sometimes disappeared for several days in the depths of the palace, and when he returned, his eyes burned with fire, as if he had seen something inaccessible to others. What did he do in these closed rooms? Why was his absence so noticeable? Researchers suggest that it was there that he created things that could not be shown either to his patrons or to the church, because in the light of the sun they seemed too dangerous, too fantastic, too suspicious. Imagine one of these rooms. Thick walls through which no sound passes. No windows, only narrow openings for ventilation. In the center is a large wooden table. Tools are scattered on it. Compasses, a pen, ink, small models of wood and metal. On the floor are fragments of gears, pieces of fabric, leather straps, wires. The atmosphere is a mixture of a laboratory and an alchemist's workshop. Leonardo was careful. He knew how to hide what he was working on even from his closest students. Some of them left memories that they had only seen fragments of his works. One spoke of a wing drawing, another of a strange device with wheels. But no one saw the whole picture. Why didn't he trust everyone? Because he knew, knowledge is power and power is danger. The story of his mirror writing is only part of this system of concealment. But even more important was the idea of creating separate spaces where he could work in isolation from the world. Such rooms became a kind of laboratories of the future. Among researchers, there is a hypothesis that Leonardo could have had access to the old Roman catacombs and used them as storage. It is known that in Florence he spent a lot of time in the dungeons, studying the flow of water and the movement of the soil. Could he have arranged his hidden rooms there? Now imagine another scenario. He specifically designed the rooms so that they looked like ordinary storerooms or warehouses. No one would have thought that something more was hidden behind a simple wooden door. After all, Leonardo was not only an artist, but also an architectural engineer. He knew perfectly well how to build secret mechanisms that concealed passages. Perhaps it was there that he worked on his most risky ideas. After all, could he openly show the idea of an underwater breathing apparatus? At a time when sailors could not even imagine such a thing, it would have looked like magic. Could he talk about a mechanical knight moving independently? He could be accused of witchcraft. And so the question arises, do these rooms still exist? Florence, Milan, Amboise in France, all these cities still preserve the buildings where Leonardo worked. Architects find traces of reconstruction, strange unnatural spaces, walled-up passages. There are legends that there are undiscovered dungeons under the castle of Klaus, where he spent his last years. Historians have even approached the authorities with a proposal to excavate them. But most such projects are stopped. It is too risky to destroy the walls of monuments. However, the very idea of the existence of Leonardo's secret rooms has become a myth that lives on today. It excites the imagination of archaeologists, adventurers, writers, and even directors. Imagine opening a door that has remained closed for more than 5 centuries and finding drawings there that no one has ever seen. Isn't this the greatest find that one can only dream of? But even if these rooms are never found, the very possibility of their existence reveals an important truth to us. Leonardo is not only art and a genius who left us several masterpieces. He is a man who thought so grandly that he required a separate space for his ideas, a space protected from the world. And perhaps the greatest mystery is not even what he created there, but why he decided to hide it. Was it fear of the authorities? Is it a conscious choice to wait for the time when humanity is ready? Or perhaps it was a challenge to the future itself, to leave it with mysteries that will force us to follow it through the centuries. Leonardo's rooms, real or fictional, become a symbol of the fact that knowledge often hides in the dark, waiting for someone to dare to turn on the light. Among all the mysteries of Leonardo da Vinci, a special place is occupied by his machines of the future, mechanisms that, it would seem, could not have been born in the 15th century. At a time when man was still afraid to raise his head to the sky and considered the flight of birds an unattainable miracle of nature, Leonardo drew devices with wings, propellers, and bodies capable of lifting a person above the ground. When we leaf through his notebooks, it seems as if he lived in two eras at the same time. With one foot he stood in his 15th century, among wars, castles, and knightly armor, and with the other in the future where man flies, moves underwater, creates mechanized assistance. His sketches look as if someone accidentally brought drawings from the 19th or even 20th century to the Renaissance. One of the most striking examples is the so-called ornithopter, a flying machine that imitated the movements of bird wings. Leonardo carefully observed the flight of birds, studied the structure of their wings, muscles, even the span and rhythm of their movements. In his notes, he wrote, "If a person has the strength of a bird and the structure of a wing, he will also be able to rise into the air." His ornithopter had 2 large wings attached to a frame and a system of belts and levers that allowed the pilot to move them, as if with his arms and legs. Of course, the practicality of this project is questionable. After all, the strength of human muscles cannot be compared with the strength of a bird. But the idea itself was so revolutionary that only a few centuries later did engineers begin to create airplanes. Next to the ornithopter we find another drawing, a device with a large screw, which was supposed to rotate and lift the structure into the sky. This is the prototype of a modern helicopter. Leonardo called it an air screw. It consisted of a frame covered with a thin fabric impregnated with a special solution for strength. When several people had to turn the handles, the screw would spin, and, according to Leonardo's plan, it would lift the device up. Some people laughed at this idea. They said, "How can a screw made of canvas lift a person?" But in the 20th century, when engineers studied these drawings, they recognized that the principle was correct. Leonardo intuitively understood aerodynamics long before its formulation. His screw could not work due to material limitations and the lack of a powerful engine. But the idea itself opened the way to the modern helicopter. Another incredible development is the parachute. Leonardo left a sketch in his diary, a pyramidal structure made of canvas fixed on wooden beams. Next to it he wrote, "A person will be able to throw himself from any height and not be harmed." In his time, this sounded like fantasy. But in 2000, British researcher Adrian Nicholas built this parachute according to Leonardo's drawings and made a jump. He proved, the parachute works. The man smoothly descended from a height, confirming Leonardo's genius and foresight. But the list of his amazing ideas does not end there. Among the drawings is a structure similar to a modern hang glider. This is a large triangular glider that was supposed to catch air currents and allow a person to glide from a height. Leonardo understood that to conquer the sky, you need not only to flap your wings, but also to use the power of the wind and aerodynamics. His sketches show the first ideas about airflow, about how to change the angle of the wing to rise or fall. It was a discovery that was centuries ahead of its time. Imagine what 15th century Italy would have looked like if all these devices had come to life. Gliders soar over the rooftops of Florence. A helicopter rises from the Tower of Milan. and somewhere in the fields they test a parachute. The world would look completely different. However, all these inventions remained on paper. Why? Because Leonardo, despite his genius, was a child of his time. He had neither light metals nor engines, nor materials capable of withstanding loads. His wooden structures were too heavy, fabric too weak, and human muscles too frail. But that is not what is important. What is important is that he laid down principles that were later used by engineers of the future. This is the phenomenon of Leonardo. He did not just draw. He tried to understand the laws of nature and apply them. His sketches are the first steps on the path to aerodynamics, flight mechanics, and the physics of motion. But was everything really limited to paper? This is where the intrigue arises. Some evidence suggests that he could build small models of his devices. And he even conducted experiments with small mechanisms. Could such prototypes have been stored in his secret rooms? So where are they now? Historians have often compared him to a modern designer who builds prototypes but does not show them to anyone. Or perhaps he deliberately decided to hide them, to avoid prosecution or, conversely, to leave the future a chance to rediscover them. Some modern engineers say, if Leonardo had modern materials, aluminum, steel, engines, his machines could well fly. He predicted the direction in which science would move, and he did it 400 years before the Wright brothers. Leonardo's flying machines are not just historical curiosities. They are proof that the human mind is capable of seeing far ahead, even when the conditions are not yet ready. And at the same time, it is a reminder that the most daring ideas often remain in the shadows, waiting for their time. In the following chapters, we will see that Leonardo's world was not limited to flight. He created military machines, automatons, and underwater vehicles. But it is precisely his flying designs that show his most daring side. His desire to overcome what was considered impossible. For is it not strange that in the 15th century, when most people were afraid to even climb a high tower, one man was already dreaming of wings for humanity? If Leonardo's flying machines were the embodiment of the dream of lifting a person into the sky, then his military developments reflected the dark side of the Renaissance. Italy of the 15th century was a land of endless wars. Princes and dukes fought for power. City-states made and broke alliances. Mercenary armies decided the fate of entire regions. In this world, any engineer was valuable primarily as a creator of tools for victory. Leonardo perfectly understood the realities of his time. To gain support and funding, he offered rulers not paintings or statues, but drawings of military machines. In a famous letter to Lodovico Sforza, he wrote that he could create light and strong bridges, artillery cannons that the world had never seen, weight-throwing machines, and even devices for protecting against sieges. It was a kind of catalog of services, and it made an impression. One of Leonardo's most famous ideas was the tank. His drawing resembles a giant turtle with a sloping shell. Inside, soldiers were supposed to stand, turning the wheels with the help of gears. Outside, rows of guns pointed in different directions. Imagine a machine that moves across the battlefield and shoots in all directions at once. It was a real breakthrough. Could such a tank work? Theoretically, yes. Practically, no. Its design was too heavy, and the transmission system had errors. There is even an opinion that Leonardo deliberately made the drawing imperfect, so that no one could quickly build it and use it in war. This opens the question. Did he hide the real version? And did he not keep it in the same secret rooms? Another of his ideas was a multi-barrel cannon, something like a machine gun. He designed a system with several dozen barrels arranged in a fan shape. When one row fired, the other cooled down, and vice versa. In this way, it was possible to conduct continuous fire. This was long before the first machine guns appeared in the 19th century. Leonardo also sketched mobile bridges. Lightweight structures made of wood and rope allowed an army to be quickly transported across a river. He even designed scissor bridges that could be folded and carried. For an era where siege warfare often decided the outcome of a battle, this was an extremely useful invention. Another of his creations was a giant crossbow machine. According to the drawings, it was several meters in size and fired shells capable of destroying walls. It looked more like a symbol of intimidation than an actual weapon. Still, the idea shows how large-scale Leonardo thought. He saw war as a field of engineering solutions, where technology could change the outcome. But here comes a paradox. In his notes, Leonardo often expressed his disgust for war. He wrote that, "There is nothing more bestial than war. How could a man with such an attitude design machines for killing?" The answer lies in his life. He had to adapt. To survive and get funding for other work, he proposed military projects. But did he really want them to come to fruition? Or was it perhaps just to curry favor with the rulers? Some historians believe that Leonardo deliberately made some of his drawings incomplete or with errors. This way he could show his usefulness, but at the same time prevent his inventions from becoming instruments of mass murder. His tank with the wrong gears is a vivid example. But the very idea of military machines left a deep mark. They showed that already in the 15th century it was possible to think in terms of mass mechanized combat. It was a prediction of future wars that the world would see only centuries later. Imagine if even one of these projects had been implemented. The battlefields of Europe would have changed forever. History could have taken a completely different path. But perhaps Leonardo understood this danger better than anyone else. And that's why he kept the real secrets in the shadows. Because even the most brilliant mind cannot control how people will use his inventions. So his war machines are not only a testament to talent. They are also a warning that progress always has a dark side. In the next block, we will see something even more amazing. How Leonardo created the world's first robot. A mechanical knight who could move independently. And again the question arises, why did he hide this invention? Among all Leonardo's ideas, one stands out in particular, the mechanical knight. It was not just a drawing of a machine or weapon, but something much more. An automaton that could imitate human movements. Invented in the 15th century, it would have become a sensation even in the 19th. Some call it the first robot in history. Imagine the age of knights, when a man in metal armor was a symbol of strength and power. And in the midst of this world, Leonardo creates drawings of a machine that can raise its arms, turn its head, sit down, and even move forward. Wouldn't this look like witchcraft to people of that time? We learned about the existence of the mechanical knight only in the 20th century, when researchers came across certain drawings in the archives. They were put together, and it turned out Leonardo really developed a mechanism that resembles modern androids. Inside the structure were systems of gears, cables, and springs. Thanks to this, the knight could move his hands, open and close his mouth, and rise from a sitting position. Why did Leonardo create such a strange machine? There are several answers. First, it could have been a demonstration of his engineering abilities in front of his patrons. Imagine a banquet in Milan, where Lodovico Sforza invited guests, and suddenly a mechanical knight enters the hall, bowing to the Duke. The impression would be incredible. This would emphasize the power of the ruler and at the same time the genius of the master. Second, it was a way to study the mechanics of the human body. Leonardo adored anatomy. He studied muscles, tendons, joints. Creating a mechanical model was a logical continuation of these studies. He sought to understand, how exactly does the body move? What mechanical principles govern our movements? Third, perhaps it was an attempt to predict the future. Isn't it amazing that his knight is essentially the first step towards modern robotics? But society at that time was not ready for something like this. Even today, when we see humanoid robots, many people feel a sense of anxiety. And what about the 15th century, when any movement of a metal man could be perceived as the intervention of an evil spirit? So it is not surprising that this project remained in the shadows. It was not widely known, it was not demonstrated publicly. Perhaps Leonardo understood. Such an invention would bring him not fame, but danger. Interestingly, when engineers in the 20th century recreated this mechanism according to Leonardo's drawings, it really worked. The knight could move his arms, bend over, even stand up. Everyone was amazed that the 15th century project turned out to be so well thought out. Some researchers suggest that Leonardo may have built a real prototype during his lifetime. Imagine yourself in a dark room, where, by the light of a lamp, he starts the mechanism. The gears turn, the springs are tensioned, and the steel warrior slowly rises before him. Only he and a few students witnessed this scene. Did he then hide it in his secret rooms? The automaton knight raises another important question. How far can human imagination go? At a time when other engineers were building throwing machines and mills, Leonardo was thinking about the artificial reproduction of man. He looked where no one else dared to look. This project shows not only his technical talent, but also his boldness of thought. He was not afraid to combine science, art, and fantasy. His knight is at the same time a work of art, an engineering experiment, and a premonition of the future. But there is another side. If his invention had become known then, it could have had dangerous consequences. Because what would the rulers do if they found out that it was possible to create a mechanical warrior? Would they not try to use it in wars? Would they not turn this idea into the first step towards armies of machines? Perhaps that is why Leonardo decided to hide his work. Because even a genius cannot predict how the world would use his creation. Today we see in this automaton a symbol that ideas can be so bold that they are hundreds of years ahead of their time. A symbol that the dream of artificial life is not a product of the modern era. It was born back in the 15th century, in the head of an artist and inventor who was not afraid to dream. Leonardo's automaton knight is a bridge between the Middle Ages and the future. A bridge that shows that the human mind has always sought to create something like itself. In the next block, we will delve into another area of his genius: underwater secrets. Leonardo dreamed not only of the sky, but also of the depths. And there he left behind ideas that could change the history of navigation. Leonardo da Vinci looked not only at the sky, but also into the depths. His curiosity knew no bounds. He wanted to understand every dimension of nature, from the flight of a bird to the flow of a river, from the structure of the human heart to the movement of waves. And among all his ideas, those related to water are especially intriguing. After all, Leonardo did not just observe it, he sought to master it. Water was for him a symbol of life and at the same time a force that could destroy everything. In his diaries, he called it the strongest element, which forms mountains, erodes stone, and gives man bread. And it was with this element that he associated some of the most dangerous ideas. Among Leonardo's drawings, we find mysterious sketches of devices that resemble modern diving suits. They depict leather bags, tubes, valves. Researchers are convinced these were the first prototypes of underwater breathing devices. Imagine the 15th century, when sailors barely understood the laws of navigation, and here is an inventor who offers a person to dive underwater and stay there for minutes. His system consisted of a mask, to which tubes were attached that came to the surface. There they were connected to a float that kept them above the water. In another version, Leonardo proposed using air tanks that could be carried with you. And although these designs look primitive, the principle was clear. A person could breathe underwater. But the most interesting thing is another. In his notes, Leonardo wrote, "I do not reveal methods for staying underwater, because they can become a means of destroying ships and killing people." This is a rare case when he openly admits that his knowledge is dangerous. He refused to describe the details. Perhaps he deliberately hid them so that no one could use this invention for military purposes. Imagine if underwater saboteurs had appeared in the 15th century. One such invention could change the course of naval warfare. Ships that seemed invincible at the time could be defeated by a few men in strange leather suits. Leonardo foresaw this, and perhaps that is why he left his drawings fragmentary. But his interest in water was not limited to underwater breathing. He created numerous drawings of pumps, locks, dams. He proposed designs for irrigation canals and even dreamed of changing the course of rivers to provide cities with water. All this was part of his global vision, to use water not only as an element, but as a tool of civilization. His project for a submarine is especially interesting. Although the drawings are poorly preserved, some researchers believe that he really thought about the idea of a closed hull in which a person could move underwater. Did he build a model? We do not know. But the fact that he thought in this direction is impressive. After all, it was still more than 3 centuries before real submarines appeared. And here again the question arises. Why did he hide all this? Why did he leave only hints? The answer probably lies in the fear of how people could use his inventions. In his time, any new technology instantly became a weapon. And Leonardo did not want his name to be associated with destruction. He was a man who wanted to know everything, but at the same time he had a rare sense of responsibility. Perhaps that is why his underwater secrets remained in the shadows. They were not developed, did not become part of military arsenals. But for us they remain a reminder that a genius often sees more than he allows himself to say. Imagine the picture. A quiet night in Venice. Gondolas stand along the canals. And somewhere underwater, in the darkness, a figure in a strange leather suit moves. He breathes air through tubes rising to the surface. He is not visible, but he is there. This is a ghost of the future, created by Leonardo's hands. Today we can only guess how close he was to realizing his ideas. But one thing is clear. He dreamed of a world where man would be able to master not only the land and air, but also the depths of the ocean. And this dream, although hidden, became another proof of his boundless genius. The next block will reveal another side of Leonardo, his anatomical studies. For he sought to understand not only machines and the elements, but also the human body itself. And there, among the forbidden experiments, he was also centuries ahead of his time. If Leonardo's flying machines and underwater inventions seem like a marvel of engineering imagination, his anatomical studies belong to another, even more forbidden sphere. They were not just a game of the mind or an attempt to build a machine. They were an insight into the very essence of human life. In the 15th century, anatomy was a dangerous subject. The Church viewed the dissection of bodies with suspicion. Most doctors used knowledge inherited from antiquity. The works of Galen, described as early as the 2nd century. Much of that knowledge was outdated and inaccurate. But no one dared to check it. No one except Leonardo. He secretly visited hospitals and morgues. There is evidence that in Florence he made arrangements with monks who allowed him to take the bodies of the dead. In dark rooms he lit lamps and began his work. While dissecting the body, he carefully studied the muscles, tendons, and organs. He made hundreds of sketches, recorded observations, and marked every detail. His drawings still amaze us today. They are not just schematic drawings. They are highly artistic depictions, with every muscle and bone traced with such precision that even modern doctors recognize their scientific value. Leonardo saw the body as a mechanism. He described how the heart worked, how blood moved, and how the lungs breathed. He even suggested that blood moved in a circle, 200 years before William Harvey's discovery. His studies of the brain are especially impressive. He tried to understand where the centers of sensation were located. He experimented by pouring hot wax into the skull to see the shape of the brain cavities. This was an incredibly bold move for the time. But all of this was a secret. Leonardo knew that if his autopsies were made public, he could be accused of sacrilege. So he used his method of concealment again. Notes in mirror writing, drawings hidden in notebooks that were not intended for the eyes of others. His anatomical works remained unknown for centuries. It was only in the 19th century that they began to be studied systematically. And then the world saw how far ahead of his time he was. But imagine if this knowledge had been available in the 16th century. Medicine could have taken a giant leap forward. Doctors would have had precise ideas about organs, about bones, about the functions of the body. Would it have saved thousands of lives? Almost certainly. However, as in the case of underwater secrets, Leonardo understood the danger. His knowledge could have led to persecution, and perhaps even a death sentence. So he chose silence. There is a legend that in the last years of his life, he dreamed of publishing a treatise on anatomy. He collected hundreds of pages of drawings and explanations. But death caught him by surprise, and the work remained unfinished. They were scattered among collectors, archives, and monasteries, and only fragments have reached us. What if, somewhere in the secret rooms we talked about earlier, his complete anatomical notebooks were kept? What if they are still waiting for their discoverer? His anatomical studies remind us, Leonardo was not limited to technology or art. He sought to understand man as such. And this made him dangerous in a world where the secrets of the body were considered sacred. He painted the heart as a pump, muscles as cables, bones as beams. For him, the body was both a machine and an art. And that is why his works are still impressive. They combine scientific accuracy and artistic beauty. In the next block, we will see another facet of his genius, mechanics, and energy. Because Leonardo dreamed not only of airplanes and submarines, but also of machines that could work on their own, replacing humans in the most difficult tasks. The world of Leonardo da Vinci is not only about fantastic airplanes, automatons, or anatomical studies. It is also about ideas about how to harness the power of nature and turn it into working machines. Energy and mechanics are another area of his genius in which he was hundreds of years ahead of his time. The man of the 15th century lived in a world where the main engine was the man himself or the horse. The power of animals, the muscles of slaves or peasants, sailing ships and water mills. This is what determined the energy of that era. But Leonardo saw differently. He sought to create machines that could work independently, using the laws of mechanics, levers, gears, and the power of the elements. He understood that, in order for the future to be different, it was necessary to learn how to store and convert energy. And it was to this idea that he devoted dozens of his drawings. One of his most interesting inventions was the project of perpetual motion. In his notes, Leonardo drew wheels with weights that were supposed to rotate without stopping. He experimented with various options: wheels with shifted centers of gravity, mechanisms with levers that were supposed to provide infinite rotation. Of course, we know today, there is no perpetual motion machine. The laws of physics do not allow this. But the very fact that Leonardo was looking for a way to create a machine that would work without a person testifies to his courage and the scale of his thinking. He was fascinated by gears. He created dozens of schemes with gear wheels, chains, gears. He saw that thanks to these mechanisms it is possible to change the speed and force of movement. And it was these ideas that later became the basis for watches, printing presses, and engines. Among his drawings we see an amazing mechanical drum. It was a device that beat out the rhythm itself, using a system of rotating shafts and hammers. In essence, it was the first automatic musical instrument. Leonardo again combined art and technology. His machine was supposed to bring pleasure, creating music without the participation of a musician. Another of his creations is the self-propelled cart. It is sometimes called the first automobile. It was a structure with springs that were wound up and then gradually unwound, forcing the cart to move forward. It even had a steering system that allowed it to change direction. Modern engineers, having recreated this cart, discovered it really works. And again, the 15th century showed what we would realize only in a century. Leonardo also created mechanisms for lifting loads: cranes, block systems, screwjacks. He dreamed that people could build faster and easier, using the power of mechanics, and not only their own muscles. His developments in hydraulics are especially interesting. He designed pumps that could pump water to a height, systems for cleaning canals, even machines for draining swamps. His vision was global. He wanted man to conquer not only the earth and sky, but also water, learning to direct its flows to his advantage. But among all his mechanical ideas, one remains the most symbolic: the Archimedes screw, which he perfected. It was a device for lifting water, consisting of a large spiral pipe. When it was rotated, the water rose upwards. Such a mechanism could irrigate fields, supply water to cities. For Italy, where every drop was valuable, this was of enormous importance. And yet Leonardo was not only a practitioner. He thought like a philosopher. In his notes, he wrote that mechanics is a paradise for the sciences, because thanks to it one can understand the workings of the universe. For him, machines were not only tools, but also symbols of the harmony of nature. Every gear, every lever in his drawings reminds us of the interconnectedness of all things. Why then did so many of his mechanical inventions remain unknown? Why did they not change the era? There are several reasons. First, the lack of materials. His springs and mechanisms were too weak. The metals of that time could not withstand the load. Secondly, people did not yet see any practical use in it. For them, the main thing was to survive, to feed themselves, to win the war. And for this, simpler means were needed. Thirdly, Leonardo himself again chose the path of secrecy. He could create prototypes, but he was in no hurry to show them. He left them in notebooks that were not intended for publication. And yet, when we look at these drawings today, they are impressive. They show that a man of the 15th century could dream of machines that we perceive as familiar in the 21st. Self-propelled carts, automatic tools, transmission systems, all this was in the head of one man. Imagine if his mechanical inventions had come to life in his time. Cities would have pumps that pump water into fountains. Armies would have carts that move without horses. Musicians would play to the accompaniment of automatic drums. Wouldn't this remind you of a fantastic future? Leonardo showed that energy is not just muscle, that the laws of nature can be used to create a new world. And in this he became a harbinger of the Industrial Revolution that would come only 3 centuries later. His energy and mechanical ideas remain for us proof that the human mind always strives to go beyond the limits of the possible. And although many of his ideas remained only drawings, they showed the direction that all of humanity will take. In the next block, we will see how these ideas intersected with art and how Leonardo's paintings themselves hide technical secrets that have gone unnoticed for centuries. Leonardo da Vinci is known to the world primarily as an artist. His Last Supper, Mona Lisa, and Madonna of the Rocks have become cultural icons. But what if his paintings were not only art but also codes, hidden messages where he left parts of his technical ideas? This hypothesis is not new. For centuries, researchers and art historians have searched for hidden signs in his paintings. Some of these searches were fantasy, some were exaggerations. But if we put aside sensationalism, the fact remains. Leonardo really loved to encrypt knowledge. His mirror writing in his notebooks is vivid proof. Why couldn't he do the same in art? Let's look at The Last Supper. This is not just a biblical scene. Many see mathematical patterns in the arrangement of the apostles, in gestures, in perspectives. The lines leading to the center of the composition create a sense of geometric harmony. Some researchers claim that it was an attempt to encode the principles of the golden ratio and proportions that he studied in nature. Or Mona Lisa. Her smile has become a legend. But does it hide more than it seems? X-ray studies have shown that there are several variants of the drawing under the main layer. This may mean that Leonardo experimented with adding layers of meaning. Some scientists even find elements in the background landscapes that resemble his technical drawings. The outlines of bridges, hydraulic structures, unusual shapes that resemble mechanisms. For Leonardo, art and science were inseparable. His drawings of muscles are so precise that they are already medicine. His landscapes are so structured that they are already geology. Why couldn't he use paintings as a place where ideas about machines, proportions, or principles of nature are hidden? There is a version that he left codes in art for the initiated. For example, in the Madonna of the Rocks, the figures are arranged in a triangle with a child in the center. This is not just a compositional technique. It is a symbol of stability, geometric perfection, which Leonardo considered the key to all sciences. In The Last Supper, the empty space above Christ's head forms the shape of a triangle, and the arrangement of the apostles resembles the scheme of a musical chord. Leonardo could consciously encode the principle of harmony of sounds in the image. He believed that all the arts, painting, music, architecture, are connected by common laws. Could these codes also be a way to hide knowledge from outsiders? At a time when the Church severely punished deviations from dogma, this was quite possible. By hiding ideas in art, Leonardo left them in a safe place. After all, who would have suspected that in the gentle landscape behind the Mona Lisa there was a drawing of a canal or a dam? We cannot say with certainty that each of his paintings is an encrypted technical document. But we do know something else. Leonardo thought in symbols. For him, art was a language with which to talk about science. And that is why we still find riddles in his paintings that make us doubt. Did he leave us hidden messages? It is especially interesting to look at his lesser-known works. For example, the drawings where he depicted the flow of water, eddies, waves. They are so precise that they resemble modern physical schemes of turbulence. But at the same time they look like aesthetic patterns. For Leonardo it was one and the same, the beauty of nature and the accuracy of science. And here the main question arises. Did he do it consciously? Is his art really a code? Or are we, people of the 21st century, trying to find something there that was not there? Perhaps the truth is somewhere in between. Leonardo left in his paintings the same principles that he explored in science. He transferred his discoveries to art. But at the same time, he understood that this was the perfect place to hide ideas that might seem dangerous. Imagine that somewhere in his paintings there really is a key to an invention that he did not want to show. Perhaps the scheme of a mechanism is hidden in the folds of clothing. Or the principle of hydraulics is encrypted in the waves of the landscape. We look at this as beauty, but for Leonardo it could have been a reminder to himself. Knowledge lives even in art. His art is not only paintings. It is a book written in the language of images. And we have not read everything in it yet. In the next block, we will approach the finale and try to reveal the main question. What did Leonardo leave for the future? Are his secrets still waiting to be discovered? And are we ready to fully reveal them today? When we look back at the life and legacy of Leonardo da Vinci, we are presented with an amazing picture. This is a man who left the world with more questions than answers. His drawings, paintings, sketches, notes. All this is not a finished treatise, but rather a cipher, a mosaic that we have been trying to put together for 500 years. His flying machines, mechanical knights, underwater suits, military machines, anatomical studies, all these are fragments of one giant puzzle. He was so ahead of his time that even today we do not always understand how he managed to see what did not yet exist. But is not the main mystery why he hid so much? In his notes, Leonardo repeatedly hinted that humanity was not yet ready. His devices could bring not only benefit but also disaster. He saw how quickly rulers turn any invention into a weapon. And perhaps that is why he left only fragments, only hints, only codes. Wasn't this a conscious strategy? Let's imagine Leonardo as a man who knew much more than he showed. He could have had hiding places, secret rooms that no one had access to. There he kept his most daring ideas. Could these rooms have disappeared with him? Or are they still waiting to be discovered somewhere in Milan, Florence, or under the Château de Clèves in France? Some historians are convinced that after Leonardo's death, his notes were divided among different people. Some ended up with the kings of France, some in the hands of the Medici, and some, perhaps, in the Vatican. Since then, the notebooks have begun to disappear. We only have a third of everything he wrote. The rest has been lost. Or perhaps it was deliberately hidden. This gives rise to another intrigue. Did Leonardo leave a message for the future? Do his lost notebooks contain ideas that we will only find when we are ready? Sometimes it seems as if he deliberately scattered his knowledge in various forms. Some in drawings, some in paintings, some in symbols and hints. As if he were creating a puzzle that those who come after him must put together. His legacy lives on today. Engineers recreate his machines and make sure they work. Doctors look at his anatomical drawings and recognize them as accurate. Architects and physicists see in his sketches an understanding of laws that were discovered only in the 20th century. But there is more. His legacy is not just about specific inventions. It is a way of thinking. Leonardo showed that science and art do not exist separately. That it is possible to look at the world with the eyes of an artist and the mind of an engineer at the same time. That a true genius sees beauty and mechanics at the same time. Perhaps this is his greatest gift to the future. Not the machines themselves, not the drawings themselves, but an example of how to think. How to ask questions where others don't even suspect they exist. How to look for answers not within the confines of one's own time, but beyond its borders. Did Leonardo have secret inventions that we haven't found yet? Almost certainly. Are there rooms full of his drawings? Quite possibly. But most importantly, his legacy is an inspiration. It's a call to all of us to look further than the present allows. Imagine that somewhere in the world there really is a locked door. Behind it is a cupboard full of Leonardo's notebooks. and someone will open it one day. What secrets await there? Are we ready for them? Will we repeat his own fears that knowledge can become a weapon? We won't get the answer today, but we already know the main thing. Leonardo left us not only the past, but also the future. His shadow accompanies us in every discovery, in every plane flight, in every robot, in every attempt to peer into the depths of the ocean. His secrets are a mirror in which we see not only him but also ourselves. Because the real question is, are we ready to use knowledge wisely? Has humanity learned what Leonardo feared? As we end this journey, we are left with the same intrigue with which we began. The greatest mind in history secretly created inventions that could change the world. And perhaps they are still waiting for their time.